Good morning, everyone. So this is July's meeting of the Housing Policy Committee, described as an extraordinary one just because it wasn't in the original schedule. So I suppose, first of all, apologies for it being actually in the first day of the school holidays, which we would try to avoid otherwise. But here we are. We've got a really important item on about housing allocations. So, just welcomes, first of all, to the members of the committee who will ask to introduce themselves shortly. We've got a number of things I'm sure everyone in the room knows where the exit toilets are, etc. But yeah, if in doubt, follow someone else. We are, of course, webcast, so people can watch this online and check it afterwards. Just ask everyone to turn their phones off or to silent, and I'll just check that I've done the same, which, yes, I have. Otherwise, I think we should just crack on, really. So I think we'd better start with introductions for the record, for the webcast. So starting with me, I'm Douglas Johnson. So I'm Councillor for City Ward and chair the Housing Committee. And go over to Fran.
Fran Belbin, Councillor for Firth Park Ward.
Matt Dwyer, Councillor for Burley Ward.
Alison Norris, Councillor for Woodhouse Ward.
Mike Chaplin, Councillor for Southey Ward and substituting today for Councillor Talib Hussain.
Good morning, I'm Richard Williams and I represent the Stannington Ward.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Penny Baker. I also represent Stannington Ward and I'm Deputy Chair.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'll ask now the officers sitting at the tables to introduce themselves. So, James, you're sitting opposite me.
Good morning, I'm James Clark, I'm the Director of Housing.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sherry Grant, I'm Assistant Director for Legal.
Joanne Cooper, Democratic Services.
And as always, thanks to Alan for managing the webcast. Okay, so we've got, so moving to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies. So, as Councillor Chaplin has noted, he's standing in for Councillor Hussain, who's given apologies. We also have apologies from Councillor Atkinson at the moment, and I don't think we've managed to have a sub at the last minute. So, yeah, that's all we have so far. 2 is exclusion of press and public, and I don't think there's anything to raise there. Around declarations of interest is item 3. I'm not expecting any. No, thank you. Number 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting, so you'll find those at page 11 of the agendas. Thanks to Joanne for circulating those. Can I ask if anyone's checked those and can approve them as a correct record? Councillor Baker seems to be proposing that, and I think Councillor Norris is nodding in a way that means she seconds that. Is everyone happy with that? Okay, unanimously agreed. Thank you very much. On the public questions, I am aware that we've had one public question in advance where there's an answer that's been published on the website. It concerns the level of private rents and rent controls, which is, as I've answered, is not a matter that the council has any jurisdiction over. Joanne, is there anything else in the way of public questions that... No. There's no others, right, okay. Thank you very much. So that deals with item 5. Item 6 is members' questions, and I'm sure there weren't any of those.
No.
Good, I'm relieved to hear that now. 7 is the work plan, so I'm going to ask Joanne just to take us through the documents which people will find at page 19.
Thank you, Chair. On page 22, you'll see a sort of fairly extensive table about changes to the work programme. Really all that was prompted by was that we had a glut of items in September, so we needed to do some rearranging to make things a bit more doable. So there isn't really anything more interesting to say about that than that was the reason why. We had a query raised by members prior to the meeting regarding the asset management strategy and why that wasn't on the work programme. I've been advised by officers that the target timescale is for the asset management strategies to be submitted to the March 26 meeting of the committee. And there's a meeting taking place at the end of this month to review that, and it should be officially added to the work programme soon after that. That's all I've got to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So, do we have any other observations on that? So, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I noticed that we're suggesting removing the fire safety scheme. Is that right at the top of that table that Joanne was talking about? That doesn't conflict with anything of our legal obligations to do anything? Or is it going to be replaced at some point in the future?
I was advised it didn't need to come to committee at this time. I'd have to go to officers for detail as to why.
Yes, I can perhaps ask James to answer this. I mean, not everything needs a formal decision of the committee, even though it might be a very important thing. James?
Yes, so I don't know right now, but I believe that is the case, that we don't need to bring it to committee, which is why it's been moved back, but we can confirm that just in case. And obviously, if it does need a committee decision and it's critical to do for health and safety, we will bring it.
Thanks very much. Any other comments on the work plan? And just check, we've got the asset management strategy back on there, haven't we? Which was picked up before. Yeah. Okay. All right. Right. Great. So if everyone's happy with that, can I have some nods if that's agreed? That's agreed. There we are. Unanimously agreed, Joanne. Thank you very much for that. So now we'll move on to the main items, and also there's two main items. So before we come on to the allocations policy, we've got the year ahead. So I'll hand over to James in just a minute. Just before I do that, can I just ask the record, I've just a message. Councillor Turpin is giving his apologies too. Mentioned it's the first day of school term, school holidays, and I think that's caught him out too with emergency childcare, which is what happens. Right, so we've got that for the record. James, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, this is the indicative work programme for the committee for its 2025-26 municipal year. I won't spend a lot of time talking about it because I think it's self-explanatory, but the table on page 38 sets out the considerable achievements of the committee in its last municipal year, notably the huge amount of work to agree investments and new policies to address some of our compliance and performance challenges. And as I set out the committee at its last meeting in June, some of that is beginning to be reflected now in our tenant satisfaction measure scores and in our other performance scores. So I think that's the main thing to note on the last year's work programme. In the 25-26 municipal year, I won't go through the table line by line because it's in front of you, but that theme of improving and addressing gaps in the council's regulatory compliance will continue to feature very heavily over the next year. There's a number of new policies on the list that will be brought forward. As was previously mentioned under the last item, there will also be a really important discussion around the asset management strategy. I would add as well, alongside that, the Housing Revenue Account business plan. And between the two documents, they're both key documents for the future of the housing service and I'd say for the future of the city. I won't say anything else at this stage other than at the back end of the report, we do flag that for a small number of items, and I'd put the asset management strategy in that category, we will be wanting to do a lot of pre-consultation with members prior to bringing a formal decision here, and there might be one or two other items that members want to pick out where we can take that approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's really encouraging. So we'll go to questions first of all. Councillor Dyer's got his hand up.
Yeah, no, it was something that jumped out from the report. So from previous years, reviewing where priorities have been, voids, repairs, and just I suppose it's a request for next year, is that we're seeing positive change, and it would be good to have that sort of, this is what our targets were and how we've matched against it, just so we can see progression throughout the years of these reports. And then it was it's good to see some stuff on private rented, because I know from my own caseload, that's something where we don't have much power to intervene, so it's really good to see some stuff, particularly jumping on the fact that there's a new renters' rights bill, and that should give more powers to residents.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. On the first point, so we currently bring a quarterly performance report to the committee. We're doing some work at the moment. I think I referenced this at the last committee meeting when we presented the Q4 performance report, to look again at what items the committee needs to see in terms of performance and improvement. We are working on a new performance framework for the service, and that will pick up some of the issues that you've referenced. So whilst voids, repairs and homelessness in particular don't feature as heavily in the work programme, that's because we've taken a lot of the decisions, and as you allude to, what we now need to do, and we need to share this with the committee, is monitor performance and check that the things we did things. On the second point, you're right to flag it. It will be a really busy year for the housing sector in terms of the private rented sector. So we're expecting the bill to progress to an Act of Parliament relatively soon. We're still waiting for the detail on exactly what that means for the council, and it may be there are further decisions we need to bring to the committee off the back of the bill. It's just too early to know right now. But as you say, if nothing else, there will be a conversation about the private rented sector solutions strategy, which I think is on the agenda for the autumn.
Thanks very much. Yeah, a good question, Councillor Dyer. Anything to follow up on that? No, if not, then Councillor Norris, you want to come in?
I just wanted to get something added to our achievements on page 38, which was that we approved a decarbonisation action plan. And there's no mention of it, and I think it deserves a mention. And also when you're looking at the quality performance indicators and the quarterly reporting, that part of that action plan was a dashboard, public dashboard about achievements. And I'm just thinking about, you know, I'm sure you'll be thinking about it anyway, but how to integrate progress reports on that stream of work with the other streams of work.
Yeah, both good points. I'll note them both. We're happy to make that change. I'm not sure why it's not on the list, to be honest with you, Councillor Norris. It may just be because the team were keen to keep it to a page, but we will add that in. And yes, absolutely noted on the second point, as well as briefing the committee on the detailed performance improvements. I think we need to improve how we share some of that progress with tenants and with customers, and we'll give some thought to that.
Thanks very much. It's actually a really good point. It's a bit of embarrassing that we didn't spot that before, because the decarbonisation action plan was a big step forward. I have to say, actually, this single page of the committee's achievements, if you like, is actually a really helpful memoir to just a summary of what's actually been done over the year. So if anyone ever asks us, we should actually reproduce that. So I wonder if we could find a way of just adding the decarbonisation on there to a suitable category, and then just recirculating it as a reference thing around members. Thanks very much. Councillor Belbin, do you want to come in?
Thank you. I know I've made the point already outside of the meeting, but I think the thing to note looking forward is that it is really, really busy. There is an awful lot on here, and I think it's not just thinking about member engagement around these issues. We'd really need to put thought into our public engagement. I know there was a Tenants' Voices conference earlier this week, which unfortunately I wasn't able to attend, but I know our tenants will be very interested, and the wider public will be really interested in a lot of these issues. So I just do think we need to put some time and thought into making sure there is enough time to do proper consultation and engagement around many of these issues, and prioritising accordingly. Thank you.
Thanks. Do you want to comment, James? I mean, I assume that really tenant engagement runs through and through everything, but do you want to say that?
Yeah, just to note the comment and agree entirely, Councillor Belbin, with what you're saying.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just for clarification on my behalf, in 3.1 it talks about that table of things we're going to be focusing on as a committee. And I note on page 41 it refers back to the fire safety external wall surveys. Just, is it going to come to committee at some point or not? I'm just not quite sure.
Yeah, I think you spotted an inconsistency, haven't you, between this paper and the prior paper. So leave that with me, Councillor Williams. Back to the previous point, we will check that and confirm either way whether it needs to come to the committee. I believe it's not related to a policy decision. It's more around whether a financial threshold is hit for the work we need to commission to do the external wall FRAs. And I think it's moved around a bit, which might be why it's inconsistent across the two papers. So my apologies for that, and we will clarify either way.
It's just we have 3 big tower blocks in Stannington that we're very keen to make sure are very safe.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that the work on fire safety in town blocks, and in fact across all our properties, certainly the flats, is pretty important. James, further comment?
Yeah, just to confirm for the record. So I suppose regardless of whether a decision triggers a housing policy committee discussion or decision, it is clearly a key priority for us over the next kind of 6 to 12 months to complete all of the external wall FRAs. We have to do that anyway. We have to submit to the building safety regulator. I believe we started on some tower blocks because I saw some images yesterday of some some quite impressive cherry pickers that are doing some invasive external wall FRAs at the moment. So that work started and it will be a priority for the next 12 months.
Might also be worth bringing to the committee's attention, I know just this week Finance Committee approved the next chunk of money of the capital spending for the tower blocks, in particular with single staircases. So it's just one of the elements of the work that's going underway. It's obviously a massive programme. Okay, any other questions on this? I think we're at the point where I recognise this is a really useful summary report of the whole year. It sets us off on a good footing. We've got the work plan that we've already approved, which has a lot of substantial things on to add to the really substantial list of things we got through last year, as set out on page 38, plus the decarbonisation plan. So if people are happy to approve that, the recommendations are on page 35, but essentially it's to note the progress made by Housing Policy Committee in 24-25 last year, recognise the work of elected members, officers and partners to deliver against our objectives that contribute to developing strong strategic foundations for the Council. And obviously we have done item 2 there, so I think the resolution that we need to make is just the recommendation in point 1, isn't it? Are people happy with that? Got nods there, so I think we can say that we've resolved that. Thank you very much. So, if so, let's move on to the meat of the meeting. The allocations policy review. So we've got Suzanne and David coming to join us on the hot seats. Would you like to just introduce yourselves first of all? Once you've got your name cards the right way around. So yeah, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Suzanne Allen. I'm head of Citywide. No, I'm not anymore, am I? Sorry. I'm the Assistant Director for Homelessness and Supported Housing.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Wilkinson. I'm the Service Manager for Rehousing Services.
Great, right. Well, thanks very much. We've got the report starting at page 51 for the record. Shall I hand over to you to introduce us to the report? Obviously, we have read it, gone into some detail, but yeah, introduce you and then we'll open up to questions.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, the purpose of attending Housing Policy Committee today is to seek approval to consult with residents and partners on a draft allocations policy which is appended to the report as Appendix 1. In December 2024, the Housing Policy Committee agreed to a review of the allocations policy through a 2-stage consultation process. The review is necessary in light of the significant housing pressures in Sheffield and the reducing number of social housing lettings available. The current policy was agreed in 2013 and fully implemented in 2016. The first consultation stage has now been completed with feedback received, helping to shape the draft allocations policy which is now before the committee. The consultation response report is appended to this report as Appendix 2. Respondents were supportive of most ideas put forward on the options for change to respond to the key challenges. However, feedback was more mixed on some potential changes, which was including removing the general needs bands and reducing the number of offers to households to 1. Officers would like to thank everybody who responded to the consultation. The option of moving to a closed register, where only households with a housing need can join, was considered. However, it is anticipated that the draft allocations policy, if implemented, would allow the Council to fulfil the objectives of the review without closing the housing register. This will be closely monitored, and moving to a closed register remains an option available to the Council in the future. The proposed draft allocations policy includes a number of substantial changes compared to the current allocations policy, and these include new qualification criteria to join the housing register, including a local connection test, a cap on household income, assets and savings, and restrictions for homeowners. A new banding system consisting of 7 bands. These will be made up of 5 housing needs bands and 2 general needs bands. The new housing needs bands closely align with the statutory reasonable preference categories and support some key local priorities, including downsizing and care leavers. An annual bid requirement, meaning that all households on the register will be required to bid at least once for social housing in each 12-month period from their application registration date. And bedroom eligibility will be amended to follow the government's bedroom standard. Properties that have significant adaptations will be prioritised for those households who require a property with those specific adaptations already in place. If adopted and subject to the outcome of the consultation, we expect the draft policy will lead to a reduction in the size of the housing register. This is because the new qualification criteria and proposed annual bid requirements. We also anticipate that the changes in housing need categories to how adapted profits are allocated and how bedroom eligibility is determined will lead to a better use of social housing lettings and a stronger focus on meeting housing need. The draft policy includes provision to reduce the number of offers made to those in the general needs bands to 1, which will mean that all households on the register are treated equally. At the same time, we note the concerns expressed by consultees about a single offer of accommodation, and members are asked to support a recommendation that we review the operation of this part of the policy in parallel with the consultation. The consultation plan for Phase 2 provides detail of the consultation with the public, internal services and relevant partners, including third sector organisations and housing providers. This is appended to the report as Appendix 3. To ensure this consultation hears from and is influenced by all residents, we will engage with less well-served groups and communities to ensure their voices are heard and incorporated into the review. The Council has a statutory duty to consult with registered provider partners about the draft allocations policy, and to follow good practice, this consultation will be open for 12 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really helpful summary there. Susanna and James, anything to add to that from your point of view, or should we just open this up to questions and so on? Right, so questions from members first of all. Councillor Baker, go to you first of all.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to start by thanking officers for all the time and effort they've put into this. It's been an awful lot of work, and I think actually members should congratulate themselves as well, because it matters so much to us, and I think it shows in the conversations we've had regarding this issue. For me now, it's time we listen to other people, and the consultation we really must take seriously. So we get the views of tenants and partners, bring it in, and are able to consider that as well as part of the final decision when it comes back to this committee. It really matters, because if we get this right, it will make a lot of difference to people who have problems with housing in Sheffield. It will leave doors open for others who need flexibility, and it needs to continue to tick all the boxes of the statutory duties that we have. So recognising that a lot of work's been done by a lot of people, and it has been taken very seriously, as it should be, I say now is the time to listen to others and then bring it back and have a look at what that consultation says in detail. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I mean, the very wise points. Obviously, it is really important that we hear as many voices as possible on what I think we all know is quite a difficult topic. In reflections and officers on that, James, you look as though you're ready to say something.
Only to wholeheartedly agree and to echo the thanks that Councillor Baker's offered to officers and members for what I think has been a really mature debate. It is a difficult set of decisions. There's no easy answers to this. We hope the proposals we put to you represent a kind of balanced set of proposals across the different views that we've heard from members of the public and stakeholders.
I think it's fair to say that we're, of course, being asked to approve a new draft policy today, which is the first new policy that's seen light of day for 10 years. But I'm sure it will change before it's actually brought into force, and that's, you know, where we could do with a lot of input, and I think it'd be useful to see how people think it would apply to them. Okay, great. Some more questions. Councillor Chaplin, would you like to come in, because you've not spoken yet?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers for bringing this report together, and to those members of the public who took part in the initial consultation, which did provide very useful feedback. But I think there is now general recognition that we cannot continue as we are, and that as a local authority we become outliers in terms of trying to maintain the waiting list system as it is. This work is really important, and it is really important that we now go to the next stage of consultation, as Councillor Baker has just outlined. I do have have a concern about where we get to point 911 about the housing of older people who are 60 plus in age. That's picked up on page 127. And certainly I'm very pleased with the new Opal that's come to Buchanan Green. Has been open for a couple of years now. But clearly relationships differ. And you may have situations where one partner is over the age of 60 and the other one is under 60, or you may have an older person with a younger relative living with them who's effectively becoming the carer of the older person, and there are other relationships on the LGBTQ line as well. So I would be a bit reluctant to see it become too prescriptive, that we insist that both people must be over the age of 60, and I would hope that we could look at that with a view to some flexibility to allow one of the people in a two-person relationship to be under that age.
Thank you. Before I ask the officers any comments on that, can I just reflect that the issue of age-related accommodation was one of the things that came up at the Tenant Voices Matter meeting on Tuesday. So although it wasn't a specific comment on this draft policy or the pros and cons of it, it was raised as an issue, and precisely that issue, that mixing ages in blocks of flats typically is something that's led to confusion, and which of course has actually led to difficulty for this council many years ago now, but with the Ombudsman in finding that the way we went about it was caused problems for people who experienced a clash of lifestyles. So although no one was to blame in any way, there was a clash of lifestyles there. So it's a very real issue, isn't it? Before I bring the answer, I just want to flag up, you point out page 127 on that paragraph there, which of course still relates to the leader scheme of delegation. So that needs changing because that went out when we ditched the cabinet system. There'll be a few little tweaks like that. But on Councillor Chaplin's really important point about age designations, does anyone want to offer any comment?
Yes, and as we've reflected, this is a draft policy proposal, and it is something that people do feel strongly about. There has been a lot of feedback from our own tenants where we have allowed people who are younger than 60 to either be on the registration or then move in subsequently, and there isn't anything in our current tenancy conditions to prevent that from happening. So there's a related issue between allocation and then subsequently what happens in the tenancy. I think that the point for me is everyone needs a home, and there are different family circumstances, different households, and it may be that a sheltered type housing situation isn't right for everyone, who've got some people over 60 and some people under 60, but there is clearly in our older people's housing strategy acknowledged a need for intergenerational housing as well, Mike. But you've described relationships where, again, I think one of the things might be a personal relationship between partners or a caring responsibility, where we need to look at what is the right range of provision we need in the city. I'll give the example where many of the registered providers have a different age banding to we do. They have over 55 or over 50. And you know at Buchanan Greens, you know well, we've also got our learning disabilities unit integrated within it. So I think what we're saying is there's a shortage of affordable housing and specialist housing. And what has happened is where we've been more relaxed around people under 60 sharing, that has caused particular issues for people that live there. So we need to be, there's both a housing management response, a matter of policy, but also meeting needs of everybody. And I'm sure it's something we'll get lots of feedback on, both from people who are interested in the policy in the public, but also from organisations who support a lot of the people who are living independently in that kind of home. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And of course, we also have the benefit of the older person's housing strategy that this committee passed earlier this year. So that's also something that we didn't have when this lettings policy was approved in previous years. Councillor Chaplin, okay? If so, go to Councillor Dwyer, who thinks you've got another question, haven't you?
Yeah, thank you. So I've got a couple, so two comments about the proposed consultation we're going to do, and then two on like the actual draft policy. So the comments on the consultation, some things that jump out. That table's really easy, that where you set out the proposed changes, and I think just in a consultation, bring it to life with examples of how this will affect people would be a really effective way of doing that. And similarly, on page 56, it talks about over 50% currently on the register have not bid for over a year, and 10,000 have never bid. And I think it's just helpful to present data like that in, say, a distribution chart, so it's really easy for people to understand what it looks like, and make it as interactive as possible and accessible as possible. And then my question was on the driver for the policy. We know that we've got quite a big, a large number of families in temporary accommodation, and it's having big pressures on the council. And I was just wondering if you've done some modelling on what this draft policy would do to getting people who are in inappropriate accommodation, B&Bs, into better housing accommodation and getting that voids time down. And then just a comment on, I'm very happy to see that the housing register is staying open personally, because I think it should be an ambition for the council when it's building council houses. And particularly in my own ward on Newstead Estate, that we're not closing off options as the government's making changes to right to buy and giving more money to councils to build. We should be like, it should be an option for people and have as many ambitious options in the city as for housing as possible. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. So I think we'll note the comments on the consultation, both really helpful suggestions, so thank you. Also noted your support for the open register in the draft policy. I'm going to ask my colleagues to respond on whether we've been able to model the impacts on B&B.
Thank you. It's a really important point, and one of the drivers is about how we can best meet housing need and alleviate that awful pressure on those households who are experiencing that kind of accommodation, as well as the related financial pressure on the council of paying for hotels, essentially. That could be better used for providing really good services. So we haven't modelled the draft policy because it is a draft, and it will take us some time to bring it in. But we have got the experience of moving to the 1 in 10 that we've currently got, and clearly that is showing really positive impacts as well as our ongoing voids improvement programme. And I can share that information after this. I think we did bring some of that information with the temporary accommodation strategy document, but we can certainly give more detail.
Just to add to that briefly, Chair, there are some more technical changes in the draft that will impact this indirectly, but in really important ways. So, in particular, David mentioned the alignment with the housing need bands with the national statutory preference categories, which will provide for a kind of cleaner, simpler policy that will align really strongly with our homelessness duties. There's also language in the draft policy that emphasises the role of direct lets, where we're able to make a letting directly to a household, for example, a household in temporary accommodation to whom we owe a homelessness duty.
Thanks. I mean, there's obviously a lot of really important interlocking things. Just one point to make, though, is that, of course, the allocations policy is really important regardless of the number of homes that we've got available. So, I mean, if we had a lot more or a lot less, we'd still need the same allocations policy. It's just, of course, the reality is that because we are in a very different environment to when our current policy was set up, then, it's more important that we get this right. Okay. Councillor Williams, going to go to you first, and then Councillor Belbin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, really building on the points that Councillor Dwyer made, in terms of the consultation, I think it's going to be really important that we have an understanding of why people are sitting on the waiting list without putting a bid in. I mean, you referred to it earlier, Douglas, about the Tenants' Voice meeting on Tuesday. And that was quite eye-opening. We had two people there who were quite open about it. I'm not going to they weren't going to put bids in yet, but they were just banking up for what they perceived to be a need going down the line. And we need to understand if there's more of those people, which I suspect there are, and why other reasons why people are are on this waiting list but not actually participating. My second point is always a general point about consultation. The most vulnerable members of our society are quite often the people who don't get involved in consultations for a number of reasons. How do we ensure that we're getting to them?
Thanks, really important questions. Any reflections from staff?
Really, really important. So on our understanding and insights into why people register and don't bid, our current policy actually encourages it. It says it's an insurance policy, do exactly that, put your name down. So that is something we allow for in our policy, and waiting time then has a currency when you do want to bid. So I think we've framed things in a way at a time when we did have far more availability, and we were saying to people, think about your future and have this plan that you may or may not need to use. And the length of time that people remain on the register without bidding illustrates that they did do it a long time ago. So that is, but I think you're absolutely right. In the consultation, we can explore with people more what their understanding is and what they're expecting from being on a register, and that does help understand how both to talk about change but bring it in, you know, when we actually need to look at implementation, and people understanding also what their realistic options will be of securing this type of housing and other things they may be needing to think about. In terms of how we make sure people are included who might find it more difficult because of how we traditionally do consult to be heard, we will be working in great detail about how we include people. That's really strong feedback, and it was something I was discussing with the team this morning actually. So with Anika is here, who's leading on that aspect of work. So we're working with our own internal communications team, consultation, for advice on consultation, as well as what we're doing within the service. But we are proposing within that, and because we've now got 12 weeks for the second stage, we will have a plan of focus groups, going to different community groups, going to people who've got credibility within communities to ask them to assist us with that process, making sure how we consult is inclusive, and it isn't for the jargon, but it's actually really clear about what we're talking about and what how people can have an input into it, and making sure there's balance within who we seek to more proactively encourage to take part. So, of course, members' views are welcome as well, and we know you know what's happening in communities, and absolutely with your encouragement, both through the LACs but individually in encouraging people to get involved is really important to us. So we've got lots of ideas. We've also been looking at how other local authorities have consulted as well on new allocations policies recently. And one of the things that we are doing is producing, as well as the ideas that Matthew put forward there, which were really helpful, we're looking at a much more really a visual aid for people to see what the policy is and where they might fit in it. We were talking about that idea today, so it makes it real for people, but also a short guide to the policy, so it's absolutely clear this is what it's about. And if you want to look at the whole lot, you can read that, so to have more accessible ways in. And although I know we've gone digital on a lot of things, but I think what you've said as well is for many people they aren't able to access things digitally, so online survey is a really important thing, but we're looking at other materials as well, and as much emphasis as we can do on face-to-face with people. So we'll have a whole schedule of events and so specific things that we put on, but also how we get involved with what's already going on in communities.
Thanks very much. And for reference, the consultation plan is set out page 193, and it's on there. I just wanted to ask, I mean, with the consultation before it goes live on Have Your Say, will those set of questions be circulated to members just so that we have eyes on what goes out before they go out?
We're going to ask you if you'd like us to do that, so absolutely we would welcome your input, and we did have that input from you on the previous first round, so if people would be willing to do that, we'd absolutely like that to happen.
Right, great, okay, we can maybe get some indicators of people like that. Probably sensible, wouldn't it? Okay, Councillor Belbin, do you have a question?
Thank you. I think it's worth reflecting that the policy this is updating was more than 10 years old, and you know there's a real need to make sure that, and I know going forward we're talking about reviewing this annually, so there was a real need to renew this and to go out and talk to people about the policy. And like Councillor Dwyer, I'm very pleased that we've ended up with an open register, not least because the feedback we got from the first round of consultation was well in favour of that. Having said that, and as we're going out to the second round, but perhaps thinking more about how we have wider conversations about housing in the city, I'm very conscious that I think it says 77% of the people who filled in their first round survey are people who were on the register. And obviously those people have got an interest in, you know, in the issue and are bound to want to participate. But housing in the city is a much wider issue than just the council housing register. And I just wondered if we've thought about, and of course we have to consult on individual policies, but as we saw earlier, we've got a whole range of different things that we will be talking to people about over the coming year in terms of new policies, and just some of the policies that fall out of this one, such as successions to council properties, are going to necessitate further conversations. So how can we think about how we have that wider conversation that isn't perhaps just, you know, what do you feel about this particular policy and that particular policy? But it feels to me that we've got to have that more general conversation about the situation with housing in the city, especially in the context of the enormous change that's happened over the last 10 years in the case of this policy, but 30 years in general in relation to right to buy and the impacts of that on social housing. And also with the change that are coming in that Councillor Dwyer also referred to, things like your Renters' Right Bill and the changes to right to buy. How can we as a council have those wider conversations perhaps that will then feed into these policies as we're generating them? Because I think it's great to do the consultation, but it feels quite limited that we're always consulting on particular policies, and I would like to see us thinking about how we engage more people from across the city, and not just those who are existing tenants or who are existing on the register, and thinking in advance about all the many issues that we're going to want to be talking to people about over the coming next couple of years. Thank you.
Thanks, yes. Just before I ask the officers to respond on that, I mean, I think it's a really important point, because the point of consultation is to draw out some useful information about what people actually know, rather than just being a poll about whether people feel they like something or not, when they may not be affected by it. But just on the point about what respondents said in the first phase of consultation, I mean, I just want to draw attention, there's a bit of a mismatch here on that. Because in the report on page 58, it says that many respondents to consultation felt that, you know, the existing arrangement of letting houses to people with no need should continue. And many respondents said that, but if you cross-match it with what's said in the actual consultation report, the finding there was that it was inconclusive. So it says, it's page 178, and it says, when asked if, rather than continue to allocate a proportion of properties to those in Band D, should we change this and allocate all properties to those with a priority first, the response was inconclusive. And I just want to draw that out because, of course, it actually is one of the real difficulties about meaningful consultation, which I think is what Councillor Belbin's getting to. So, and I raise this because, of course, as a committee, we're a bit on the fence about the open register. I'll just say personally, I'm less in favour of it and think that we should be prioritising homes towards people who've actually got needs. But it's that's exactly the sort of thing we've got to consult on. On the really important points that Councillor Belbin raised, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, a lot in there. So just on that specific point, I think when we looked at the consultation responses, they were mixed. People absolutely said we do want an open element of a register or completely open. But we also think housing should be prioritised for people in housing need. And I think that's part of the wider conversation that Councillor Belbin referred to, really, about what people's understanding is of housing in the city, what the options are, and what they may be going forward, and how that will impact on communities and individuals. So I think people can think two things at the same time. And then when we put it together, that's about how do we realise that ambition? Because I think essentially, and I think this has been reflected in this committee, we would all like more affordable social housing to be available, as well as other housing, and for that to be a choice that people can make. So I think it is this sort of a bit of a disconnect between the reality at the moment and what people would like to happen. In terms of that wider conversation, Fran, I think if we recall when we agreed the housing strategy and then many of the subsequent strategies that follow from it, exactly your point, we've said there has to be an ongoing conversation with people in Sheffield about housing, and it isn't a one-off consultation. So there will be specific consultations that we are required to undertake or want to, and some of them have to be very specific if it's about our tenants, and there will be a schedule of things. There will be and events and ways that we will engage, which we will do. I think the other part of it, there will be a raft of consultation that we will respond to in terms of government feedback to government proposals, where you will take a view on how much involvement you want from residents in any of that work. But also I think some of the conversation we've had today is about how you consult differently in a way that's meaningful, so that you're not saying, what do you think, and we'll go and do it. And I think we've talked previously, and we're doing the housing strategy, about co-production, about how you absolutely work with communities and individuals within them to say, this is about shared responsibility and we're willing to share that with you. So I think because of the huge amount of change there is in housing, both challenges and opportunities, there will be a lot of opportunity to work with people in Sheffield about what they want and what they think. And as a council, we will do some of that stuff directly ourselves, but a big role we've got is enabling and articulating what the city needs and wants, and working with other partners, including government, to deliver on that. I think one of the points, though, is about coordinating all of that, because we, you know, when you've looked at your own work programme going forward, there's a lot on. So I do think there is something about us getting smarter in how we consult to make sure people don't feel, but you just asked me that, and how different is it? And I think, to your point, Doug, that we make sure, as far as we can, we're getting precise and meaningful information back, so it isn't ambiguous, or if it is, we've got ways of exploring that with people. I don't know if James wanted to mention anything further.
I agree with everything Suzanne said. Just two quick reflections to add. So I think we need just to take the challenge, I think, that you've offered us, Councillor Belbin, around particularly how we engage groups who we know nationally, however hard you try, are much less likely to respond to a formal consultation. And for the purposes of this particular decision, that's going to be people who are more likely to be in the private renter sector, on low incomes, particularly people who are in temporary accommodation, transient population, busy lives, etc., etc. So we need to take that challenge and reflect on it. It's not just relevant to this policy, as you say. The other point I've made a few times to committee members, including to you, Councillor Belbin, is we also need to bring the rest of the evidence that already exists to bear when decisions are being made. So it's not like we're operating completely in a vacuum here. We do have some intelligence already available to us about housing needed in the city. We probably also have some intelligence available to us about how people feel about housing in the city, and we should be bringing that to bear in committee decisions alongside the really important kind of specific responses we've received to a consultation.
Yes, of course, Councillor Belbin.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. I really wanted to come back to your point, though, Chair, which was on the responses to the consultation, because I do take your point about the table on page 178, but if you look at the table on page 176, which does, you know, specifically ask about people without a priority joining the housing register, there's quite a clear majority in favour there. But, you know, I do totally... That's the purpose of my original point, is to have that wider conversation, and you know, that's something that could change in the future. I totally accept that, but I think it is worth pointing out that we are very much, I think, the recommendations that we've got here do fall quite broadly in line with the results of the existing consultation. Thank you.
Yep, also a fair point. Okay. Good, Councillor Baker. Or, okay, Councillor Norris, yeah, fine. Yep.
Just adding on to consultation while we're talking about it. As a general point, I think opportunities, we do a lot of what I call serial consultation, where, you know, you respond to a survey or you answer some questions, or whether that's in person or not. But one of the useful things is to hear what other people say and create some sort of joint response, because we find that working amongst ourselves, that your views can change as you hear other people's perspectives. So that's just, I'm glad that there are more opportunities in here for both public open meetings and for working with groups where they meet already. And that was something that, again, at the Tenants' Voices meeting earlier in the week, people welcomed that, being able to meet together. I know from my ward's residents' response to the local plan that there still is quite a strong feeling that we're over-reliant on social media, and it's really important. I'm glad to see you're doing general media, press releases, other ways that people can know that the consultation is happening and find out how to get involved. You're saying about doing stalls in the mall market. One of the things, again, from Tenants' Voices was at the district centres. So, for instance, doing stalls at Crystal Peaks, or because you get quite a lot of people that way. A personal response to the banding is it's quite hard to get your head around what it actually means in practice. And, you know, often you've got a list of 7 things where, well, they're in this thing if they're not in the other one. So I think the more sort of concrete examples of who would fit where and why that you could put alongside that, like stories about people, real, you know, families, nothing too long, but the more specific you can get there, I think the easier it is to understand the implications and who might get allocated where in this new proposed system.
Thanks. Any, I don't know if there's any comments on there.
Just to note, the comments really helpful. Thank you, Councillor Norris. And just on the bandings, I mean, I've just observed that it's indicative of the situation we're in, where we're having to think of additional words to describe the severity of need. So we've got significant need band for, critical need, urgent need, and then emergency need. And it is depressing, but that is the situation we're in. One of the points I probably should have made when we introduced this is there will be a whole load of procedures that sit underneath the policy that will flesh out how different aspects work. That's a deliberate choice that we've made because it's important that you have the appropriate stuff in the policy versus in procedure. It gives us a bit more flexibility to operate. And of course, areas that the policy, the committee are particularly interested in, we've already mentioned choice, but there might be others, we are more than happy to share details and drafts with committee members, even if it's not formally a kind of committee decision.
Thanks so much. Councillor Norris, do you want to come back?
Come back on that. We're going to keep some discretion in the policy, aren't we? I mean, are we looking at how needs stack as well? How different aspects of needs accumulate?
We've not put anything in the draft policy around cumulative of housing need, no, but there will be an element of discretion in there. So there is a specific section on when we might apply discretion and the types of situations that they might apply to.
Thanks very much. Okay. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. So, really good conversation about consultation. Going forward, we've got a really big job ahead of us. Getting this right matters, and as Councillor Belbin has said, it's 10 years since this change. You know, you almost want to throw it away and really start at the beginning, but we're very concerned about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as they say in this area. We mustn't forget that we now have different parts of the city consulting on different things. We have a communications department. We need to communicate with them and help them communicate with us. We've got the expertise. Let's use it. Use it or lose it, they say. But I love the idea of going out into district centres, representing a ward that the majority of it is rural, and knowing that we have a lot of sundry properties out there. I mean, we have sundry properties where people are vying to live. You know, how can two homes in the Loxley Valley in a lovely area you know, how are we going to communicate with them if we don't go to something like district centres? So we need to actually make that extra effort and almost go backwards in some communication methods, because some areas of our city still don't have internet. We still have black areas where people can't be contacted online. So I think the conversation we've had personally is really interesting. I think we need to remember that this is a draft policy and things in here after consultation can be changed and nothing is set in stone. We also are very aware, all of us, I think, that we don't know what's going to come out of government in the meantime, and if any of that's going to impact on this. So we have to keep our eyes and ears open. So I think we're all on the same line. We need this communication and this consultation to be as broad as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay. I suppose just the observation about the consultation is that we do have the advantage of having a number of people in temporary accommodation with whom we have direct links with, and actually they are often going to be in sort of groups of people who we would often not have contact with, but also they will have some very relevant information about being at the sharp end of the housing system, and it would be very good if we could spend some time very clearly getting their views and their experiences, which I think could be invaluable. That's just my comment. I think if we're done with questions, we should just look at what we're being asked to approve today. So they're on page 53. There's 5 recommendations there. So essentially it's to approve the draft policy that's set out in Appendix 1 for the purposes of the consultation, approve the launch of public consultation, agree that the outcome of the consultation will come back in early 2026 to this committee, agree the final draft of the allocation policy will be presented back to the Housing Committee at the same time, presumably. Note officers will also review the procedures for making single offers of social housing and make additional recommendations to the committee, presumably at the same time in early 2026. And then note that after 12 months of the implementation of the new policy, there'll be a review. So that all seems sensible to me. Does that seem sensible and acceptable to everyone else? Is everyone happy with that? Okay. In that case, we can treat all that as approved unanimously as set out there. Thanks very much for the huge amount of work that's gone in, and get ready for the next huge amount of work that we've just committed you to doing. So thank you very much there. That seems to be the end of the meeting, so that means that we can wrap up until our next meeting in September on whatever date it is, the 18th of September. Thanks very much for attending today. Thanks to everyone for making the meeting happen, and we've finished in good time today, so we can get a little bit of time back. Thank you very much.